I think someone in the Obama administration has been watching The Ed Show here on MSNBC. Tomorrow, the president is expected to visit a small business in Maryland and announce a plan to increase credit and lending to small businesses. It's about time. The proposal would increase caps on Small Business Administration loans, and it would give smaller banks easier access to TARP funds. And this is what we've been waiting for and what we've been talking about for a long time. Helping small business to create jobs is an important step in turning this economy around for all Americans. It's just not those on Wall Street that got $700 billion. It's the community banks that can get involved in this to help the small businesses out. Let me bring in Jared Bernstein, chief economist and economic policy advisor to Vice President Joe Biden. Mr. Bernstein, great to have you with us.
My pleasure.
I've been banging this drum for a long time. Is this the planned phase 2 to get the money out? And what will this Obama proposal and effort tomorrow spell out for the small banks in this country?
I don't want to get too much ahead of tomorrow's announcement. I think you covered the central points in your introduction. I think phase 2 is probably an appropriate characteristic if phase 1 is the Recovery Act. Because, Ed, I want you and your listeners to recognize that we've done a lot for small business in the Recovery Act. Fee elimination, loan guarantees up to 90% in both the 7A and the 504 programs, to take you right down in the weeds. That's over $10 billion of small business lending. There's the ARC loan, the American Recovery Capital Program in the Recovery Act. That's a total deferral of payment, loans up to $35,000, 100% guaranteed. So the Recovery Act actually was trying to go a good part of this distance. I think what you just talked about, though, in your introduction does characterize a phase 2.
But, Mr. Bernstein, I am hearing too many stories from small businesses where banks are tight with a dollar. Yeah. They've got their own credit restrictions, and they're not participating the way the administration thought they were going to. It's very clear.
Ed, President Obama, Secretary Geithner have heard those same stories, and as you just announced, they're reacting.
Well, I'm glad of that. That's for sure. I mean, because you can't have two different recoveries. I mean, the American people are out there saying these guys are celebrating with bonuses on Wall Street, and you've got small businesses out there that their community bankers looking at them different when they start talking about a loan. And the rates are high, too. You have to admit that. The rates are high.
Look, I'm with you on many of these points. Credit constraints are one of the factors that have really held down this recovery from the perspective of small business. That's very much embedded in what we've tried to offset with the Recovery Act and the kind of announcements we're talking about for tomorrow. We know that some of the bigger firms are able to go into capital markets, borrow at favorable rates, but credit-worthy small businesses are facing a kind of constraint that's blocking them, and we need to help them overcome those barriers.
All right, this is one of his closest advisors, Mr. Axelrod, talking about this situation earlier. Here it is.
The most offensive thing is we haven't seen the kind of increase in lending that we should. There are a lot of small businesses, credit-worthy businesses around this country who still can't get the capital they need to grow, which is important for our economy. And you've seen these same institutions spend tens of millions of dollars lobbying the Congress to try and stop financial regulatory reform.
And that obviously is where Americans are. It speaks to the obvious. But the small business person feels like they're being left behind in many respects. I know you mentioned a couple of programs there that are out there, but the banks still call the shots. And until the administration, until the White House starts dictating what to do with this government money to make it accessible, Mr. Bernstein, how's this going to turn around? I mean, nice guys lose when it comes to finance. Somebody's got to step up and tell these bankers what to do with this federal money.
I think the way to accomplish this goal is really twofold. One is precisely the kinds of programs through the Small Business Administration that I mentioned earlier. You know, when you're talking about a 90% loan guarantee, when you're talking about fee eliminations, the kind of principles that are in the Recovery Act, they're good. They're helping, and if you talk to our SBA, they'll document the extent to which folks are taking advantage of those. But I grant you that that's a smaller segment of the pie. We also have to make now. you can go after some of these small commercial banks, but the fact is that many of them are sitting on some troubled balance sheets, and one of the ways we can help them is by boosting their capital with some of the TARP dollars. Now, by the way,
okay,
that's happened. That's already been part of the TARP.
That's true.
What you're hearing about tomorrow is ratcheting that component up. That should really help.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I got to make one more point here. But I think to stimulate the job, you got to dictate where this money is going to go and stop letting the bank be the middleman and making the money. That's my whole point. Because we've let Wall Street go do whatever they want to do with the money. They haven't created the jobs. And until we get it into the community banks and say, look, community bank, we're going to give you so many millions of dollars, and this is what you're going to do with it, and we are going to back it up. What's wrong with that?
And the way this is supposed to work is a credit-worthy borrower comes into a bank, sits down, tells the loan officer about a plan to expand, about a plan to maybe roll a loan over, about a plan to fulfill their inventory or payroll, and that loan officer looks at the books, makes an objective call as to whether this is
It shouldn't be his call. That's the whole thing, Mr. Bernstein. It should not be his call.
No,
this is taxpayer dollars to start jobs in this country. Hey, look, I'm for you. I mean, I'm rooting for you, you know, and I want the Obama administration to kick some ass and take some names and create some jobs. I mean, I want that. But
let me get a word in here. Look, that's the way it's supposed to work, and when it doesn't work that way, because the bank is either too risk averse, is misjudging that credit-worthy borrower as someone who's a bad risk because they're just too nervous.
But I've got people coming to me telling me that they're not a bad risk. I can show you examples of people who've got great credit.
I agree, and that's the problem that you heard David Axelrod identify, the president, Secretary Geithner. And what we need to do is to make sure that these banks are starting to lend to these credit-worthy borrowers in the small business sector so they can get over this hump.
Mr. Bernstein, we got to continue this discussion. I'm on the team. I just think the method needs to be steroided a little bit, so to speak. Good to have you with us. I appreciate your time tonight.